Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Storytelling Time. My name is William Porter, and this week, again, we have Jimmy Davies with us. Of course, he was with us last week, and he talked about his early life and his time coming up in Flint, Michigan. And we have him again this week, and he's going to go ahead and tell us more about his background, or at least finish that up with respect to computers. That's what we ended up talking about last week.
Right.
So do you want to finish up what we started last week as far as your experience in computers?
Sure. Like I was telling you last week, is that I really was looking for a computer to go along with my janitorial service, help me with my janitorial service, and a friend showed me a Macintosh computer. It hadn't been out for a couple of years at that time. And I had played around with some DOS machines, or remember the old DOS machines, but nothing with a graphical interface. And that just blew me away. So beginning of January of 1988, I started McMaster's Computer Training Service. And because I didn't really know how to use one, didn't have one at the time, like I said, I would buy the books and study on the books. And I also ran into a couple of people. One guy's named Dan Perret. He worked at NASA, at the NASA facility there in Hampton, Virginia. And he was really big on Macintosh computers. And so I think our first job, we had a small job. We trained one secretary for one day at NASA. And he did that, but we used that one job. We went to the Army and said, hey, we just completed a job at NASA. And so they gave us a contract to train staff or train the officers for the Army. And we were training them on software like PowerPoint and Microsoft Word and Excel, and at the time PageMaker, and all the software was coming out during the 90s, and no one knew how to use it. So we couldn't train people fast enough. So I began to realize maybe after a year, maybe 6 months or so, I was doing a lot of the training myself. But I began to realize that no one knows how to use this software. So I went to the library, actually. And I looked up in that time the Yellow Pages to see who's offering computer training. I couldn't find anyone in Greenville, South Carolina, or Charleston, South Carolina, or Charleston, West Virginia, or Atlanta had people, or DC had people. And so it dawned on me, by this time I'm doing these regular sessions, by this time it dawned on me that I've got a business here. So what I did, I want to do a mass mailing of all the people that are using Macintosh computers in the state of North Carolina, state of Virginia, state of South Carolina. So I went to the magazines, Mac User and Mac Today at that time, Mac World, Mac User, Mac Today were some of the big magazines. And they would sell their subscriber list on labels. And I would buy them, send out thousands of flyers to people, Macintosh users. At the time I didn't have the money, so I sold my car to raise enough money to buy the labels and do the mass mailing and the printing. And it worked. And I would schedule usually 4 or 5 cities at a time, so that if one city doesn't work, I would get the other 4 or other 3 would carry the load, share the risk. It got to the point where I had to hire other instructors, had an office manager, had a marketing person. We were providing computer training in 30 cities throughout the Southeast on a regular basis. And there were times when I literally couldn't get home. Again, this was during the 90s. And all the software was coming out, Photoshop, Illustrator, Quark Express, you name it. I probably taught on it at some time or another. When I started adding it up, I've estimated that I trained about 5,000 people on how to use software, all types of software. But then around the year 2000, I saw a shift. The demand was going down, and I started specializing, and I couldn't keep up with all the different software packages. So I started specializing as a database developer with a program called FileMaker. And what happened, people would ask me to come in and teach them how to use FileMaker. And then they realized that there's more to it than just a one-day class. And then they would want to pay me to create the database for them. And that kept happening over and over. So I started specializing in FileMaker database development, which I did for about 15 years, and worked for a number of companies, or with a number of companies during that period. One marketing ad agency out of Richmond, Virginia, learned a lot about marketing. They were doing traditional marketing like TV, radio, billboards, but they weren't doing anything on the internet. And then worked with a medical clinic in Raleigh, 6 years, developing medical software, keeping track of patients and all types of information. But maybe I should give you a chance to ask a question. But I was just trying to give you some background information on the computer skills. And then around the year 2015 is when I started looking at what can I do to really use the skills that I had learned over the years. Because I was always helping other people with their computer needs. I was helping people with their databases. But I was like, what can I do that I want to do? And I think that's when I started thinking about what I spoke about last week, being left out during the civil rights movement. That's when I started realizing that there's something I can do now to make use of my skills.
But you know, it's kind of interesting that you talk about the technology back in the 1990s. We're talking about the 1990s. As opposed to, we're almost in the year 2020. And as you know, technology has changed so much.
It doesn't stop. Right.
So it's a challenge, I would think, to have kept up with all the changes in technology. So were you able to do that in a way that you were satisfied with?
Well, that's why I realized I started need to specialize in something. And around the year 2000, I started specializing in database development because I couldn't keep up with everything. Something else I do want to mention that during the 90s, I don't know if you remember AOL when it was big. Well, Apple had a competing service called eWorld. And what I did, I submitted a proposal to Apple to have a section of eWorld for African Americans. And they accepted my proposal. So I worked with Apple for about 2 years on eWorld. We called it the African American Information Network, which was really the predecessor of Every.Black. A lot of the things we did then, we had about 600 people around the country that were signed up on eWorld through our portal, the African American Information Network portal, where we provide all types of information for the minority community. We had chat sessions each week, and provided information, whatever was going on, the news of the day. I think another couple of organizations that started too, I started realizing that computer trainers, there was no association for computer trainers. So I started one called the Association of Macintosh Trainers. And these were computer trainers from around the country that were teaching Macintosh computers. We had about 250 members of the Mac Trainers Association. And then one other one I started was the Database Association, Association for Database Developers. But again, at the time, it really isn't dawning on me, but these are all the building blocks for Every.Black.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, there's associations and using technology, but right.
Well, you know, this brings us to, and we'll probably get to this after a break. We'll go ahead and take a break now. When we come back, I want to talk more specifically about your faith, because I think indirectly we've been kind of talking about that since we've been having this discussion about technology and what you've done since your early days. So we're going to go ahead and take a break now, and we'll come right back with Jimmy Davies. Welcome back. Again, we're here with Mr. Jimmy Davies, and he's been talking about technology and how he had been involved and still is involved in technology in his business pursuits. But we want to talk a little bit more about the background of his success in business that largely involved technology, and that is his faith. And we really haven't talked specifically about your faith, Jimmy, but and I assume that goes way back to your childhood. So where did you first recognize the fact that you had a destiny, maybe as guided by a divine influence in your life to move in this direction?
Well, again, it didn't happen right away. When we were kids growing up in Flint, I have a sister, so that just the two of us, we went to church every Sunday. No choice. We were in church every Sunday. And I promised myself, when I get old enough, I am not going to church. I had enough. We were going to a Baptist church. We'd be there all day sometimes. I said, I'm done with this. And so for years, I didn't go. And not only that, at that time, too, I felt like, how do you know there's a God? How do you know unless you die? And it would drive my mother crazy because I just couldn't say that I believed. It didn't make sense. How do you really know? But one thing that one of my cousins told me, she says, well, Jimmy, she says, when life beats you up enough, you'll come back to the church. And she was right. So I guess it was actually during the middle of the computer training when the computer training was really taking off, but some of the other aspects of my life weren't doing so well. And two things happened that really made me start thinking about it again. And one, I have one cousin, his name is Keith, and Keith and I have a lot of cousins, but they're female, a lot of girls, and Keith and I were the only boys. So Keith and I became very close. Keith was a few years younger than me. But when we grew up, Keith sort of went one way. He kind of got into drugs. And I'm not sure what all he was doing. He never got into any serious trouble. And I went on to school and went to college. But for quite a while, the family was very concerned about Keith. We just didn't know where he was a lot of the time. Well, I think it was around 93. He came to the family reunion. He hadn't been coming to the family reunions. He came to the family reunion, and I've been hearing my mother, she was saying that Keith has really changed. He's in the church now, and he's really made a difference in his life. And saw him at the family reunion, and I could tell immediately when I met him, when I saw him again, like Keith is different. It was just he was genuine. You could tell he was genuine, and it made me start thinking about it because he and I were so close. And I think the other thing that sort of got me really thinking about it was the guy. His name was Ken Boyd. Ken Boyd had been in prison, but he was a database developer, and I would hire him sometimes to help me with jobs. We were in Roanoke, Virginia, and I don't know if you're familiar with Roanoke, but there's a mountain there called Star Mountain. There's a big star on the mountain that lights up at night, and nothing else around there, just this one big mountain right in Roanoke. And so after the training that day, he says, let's go up on the mountain. He says, I want to show you a nice area that I found, and we went through the woods and got up on the mountain. And he took me to this place that kind of overlooked a cliff, brooks down below, stream, a beautiful area. And we started talking about God and the Lord. And Ken said something that stuck with me. He says, I look at God as being the master programmer. And I can't explain it, but that, what? I think I can buy into this.
Relate to the programming
I can
part.
yes. And that's what made me think. I said, I need to find out more. And I started going back to church on my own because I wanted to know, I just wanted to know. I wanted to figure this thing out. And so the more I started going to church on my own, after I swore I'd never go again on my own, then I started coming to the conclusion. Ultimately, I came to the conclusion, you know what? I think there's a God, and I think that as you're in business, I heard someone say, when you're in business, just you and the Lord. And sometimes it feels that way. It's like it's just you and the Lord. And some things that have happened to me, I can't explain it any other way. And it wasn't a day one that my faith is strong. It's an ever-growing thing, but I just came to the conclusion that I need to make some changes in my life. The way I look at the Bible, the more I learned about the Bible and study the Word, is that it's really a manual on how to live, and I try to apply it.
Yeah, it is a learning process. It takes place over time. You're continuing to go upward in your knowledge and understanding about spiritual kinds of things, and And so your experiences, that's what I write about in the books that I've written, about the unusual and extraordinary and even sometimes miraculous things that happen to people, experiences that you can't explain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly one of them. Yeah.
I was going to say that I think because I'm in the computer field, learning all of this about technology, starting to I guess rethink my spiritual life, or the combination of those things, like what am I here for? The Warren, what's his name? Warren, the Purpose-Driven Life.
Not Warren Buffett.
No, not Warren Buffett. I can't remember his first name, but anyway, he wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Life. And
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and we were reading that, and that's what made me think, like, why am I here? And so eventually I came to the conclusion that I need to use my talents and God-given skills to make a difference, which ultimately led to Every Dot Black.
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier, and that is, you mentioned purpose, and that's really what makes life satisfying, if you understand that you have a purpose, and if you can satisfy that purpose, then it really makes life a lot more satisfying than not knowing what your purpose is, or if you are just living life from day to day, not going in any particular direction. And so that's very, very significant. Speaking of faith, though, how has faith been connected, and I'm assuming in a positive way, in your business as you continue? And I think you hit on that just a minute ago. As you continue in your business pursuits.
I think that, just my personal belief, I believe that God gives us what we need when we need it. And sometimes not necessarily when we want it. It's a song may not be there but he's always right on time. Right. And Rick Warren, by the way, is the author. Warren. Yeah, that just came to me. But I think that when you step out on faith, trying to live up, trying to decipher, what am I here for? We may not see the solution. We may not see all the dots connected, but it happens. But you have to step out on faith and take action towards it. And that's where I believe the divine intervention just starts to happen. It just, things come together. For example, I knew that I wanted to do something when I left the medical industry, creating medical software in 2015. I didn't know exactly what, but I knew I wanted to use my technology skills in some way. And within a few months, I was introduced to Joe Dudley through a mastermind meeting. I had never heard of Joe Dudley. I actually received an email from Dr. John Ray, never heard of him. Started to disregard it because I didn't know who these people were, so I thought I'd Google them. And when I Googled them both, all types of information came up, and I thought, I need to go to this meeting. That one meeting ended up into a year and a half of weekly meetings learning about entrepreneurship. I didn't see that coming, but because I took that first step, then the things started to fall in place. And then it became clearer for me that I needed to use my technology skills to help others create wealth through entrepreneurship, to make a difference in their lives. I think another thing that happened is that I made a video about the importance of being an entrepreneur. Short video, put it on the internet. Bishop Michael Bates out of St. Louis, Missouri saw the video and called me, asked me for an interview. So I did one interview, 1 hour, asked me for another interview, did a second interview. After the second interview, he just asked me, would you like to have your own radio show? I'm like, sure. So actually my first thought was, well, how much? He goes, no, I believe in what you're doing. I want to give you a radio show 1 hour a week. So we did that. After 3 months, that 1 hour a week turned to 7 hours a week. Another month, it turned into 24 hours a week. And that's when I started bringing on other people like yourself to, hey, we would like to fill this time, but we want to talk about entrepreneurship and inspire people to do better in their lives. So, but again, you don't see that coming. But if you don't take those initial steps, I just think it's so important that you don't have to see the whole, as Joe Dudley says, you don't have to see New York in order to believe you can drive to New York. Right. You get in your car and you start going.
Right.
And if you hit a detour, you don't stop and turn around and go home.
Exactly.
You find a way around the detour.
Exactly. Tell our listening audience and viewing audience a little bit more about Joe Dudley in a brief period of time we have left, maybe in a minute. Because he's been very influential. I can tell that he's been that way for you and for a lot of people, as a matter of fact, especially in business.
Yeah, actually, you can't tell the story of Joe Dudley without mentioning his mentor, S.B. Fuller. S.B. Fuller, born in 1905 in Louisiana, started with $25 during the 30s, 40s, and 50s and ran it up into $18 million a year. He mentored thousands of people, including Joe Dudley. And so when he passed on, actually, he literally turned over everything, his formulas and everything for his beauty products over to Joe Dudley. And Joe Dudley has continued those mastermind meetings for another 40 years. S.B. Fuller did it for 40 years. Joe Dudley's continued it. And then in 2015, I began to go to the meetings. And that's why right now we're holding a similar, pretty much the same format, meetings in Raleigh, Durham each week for anyone that's thinking about being an entrepreneur or wants to learn about entrepreneurship. The meetings were always free when S.B. Fuller did it. They were always free when Joe Dudley did it. And they're free now for anyone wanting to come and attend and learn to better themselves through entrepreneurship. So, but yeah, it was just, and Joe Dudley started with $10, ran up to $36 million a year, hired thousands of people, actually had several businesses, and he's really kind of a legend in the industry, in the beauty care industry. So we still have the privilege of meeting with him. Literally, he's an hour away. Anytime we want to go, he still opens the house up to anyone on Sundays and Tuesdays in his home. Anyone can go and just... and
I understand he's in Greensboro.
In Kernersville,
right outside of Greensboro.
Exactly, right.
Great. Well, that's true. Faith works like that. If you act, then somehow you'll be guided in the right direction. And I think you've been guided in certainly a very productive direction when you met Joe Dudley, Dr. Joe Dudley, and Bishop Bates, of course, had a radio show. That's when I met you.
Right.
And so that's very great. Well, listen, we're going to go ahead and take a break now, and when we come back, and we only have a few minutes left, but we're going to ask Jimmy about the future and let us in on some of his intended activities over the next several weeks and months and years, especially beginning next year, and I think it's very, very exciting. You don't want to miss that. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking with Mr. Jimmy Davies, and you mentioned your work in Mastermind, and you have a Mastermind meeting that occurs every Monday. I'm a regular attendee at those meetings, and they're very exciting. I believe the last meeting I attended, there were over 30 people. But you were also telling me about something that you want to do within the next several weeks. It involves technology. You've talked to us about technology. That's very, very exciting. So what do you see for the future as far as what you've been doing in terms of technology and the vision that you have for Every Dot Black and moving forward in this enterprise? Sure.
I think, I mentioned Joe Dudley. I think going to the Joe Dudley meetings helped me to refine the message, understand the mission, understand the message. I believe that Bishop Bates, when he gave us the radio shows, helped us to spread the message. So I think we refined the message, we're spreading the message, but I think we need to continue to use technology, not just over the airwaves, radio airwaves, or through the podcast, but I think it's also important that we use video as well. I think that's really the future. I believe that what we've done with Every Black is that we've kind of worked on a model, and now it's time to share that model with the world. What I mean by that is we've got a website now that lists the members. We've got a membership directory that we're publishing now to let the public know what the members are doing. We have, again, you mentioned the mastermind meetings where we meet face-to-face each Monday evening, and we also have a second group in Dallas now that has sprung up from our Raleigh-Durham group. We have a podcast where we're airing shows 7 days a week now on our podcast around entrepreneurship. We also have a virtual conference that we hold periodically, about 2 times a year, where we have just a day full of the presenters, and not to mention our presenters talking about entrepreneurship, where the members can do that. And not to mention, but our growing social media audience, with this particular Facebook and Twitter. We have a growing email blast list where we send out information out each week about what the members are doing. So we've I've looked at it this way over the last year and a half, 2 years. We've really kind of got a model in place now, and now I think it's time to share that, not just the Raleigh-Durham area, North Carolina area, but I think it's something that's needed really around the world. And I think it's time now to share what we've done, the information we provide through the podcast, the mastermind meetings, the networking that's going on, email blast, social media, virtual conference. It's time to share that around the world. And so I think it's time to take it to the next level.
And speaking of around the world, we have listeners around the world. I understand as far away as certain countries in Asia and South America.
One of the things that surprised me, as soon as we put the podcast out, we were getting hits from China and Canada, but South America, Brazil, Italy, Spain, Japan. There's listeners all over the world that are tuning in to our podcast. I think it's time to really push that message out worldwide.
Not to mention every part of the United States.
Oh, definitely. I didn't even.
And the last thing I want to mention is the virtual conference. You didn't mention that, but we have a virtual conference coming up in March of next year, right?
Well, and actually April. Yeah, we've got a virtual conference coming up in April. And one thing I didn't mention too that we haven't even really officially announced yet is we're also looking to do a follow-up to the gala. We did a launch party in 2018. And I've been approached to do a special edition of a mastermind meeting in January of 2020. But the virtual conference is where the members can put together usually about 20-minute presentation about their field of expertise. The last virtual conference, the theme was entrepreneurship or technology, the entrepreneur's equalizer. The next conference, the theme is going to be about branding. So for a day of really great information that the members are providing, anyone will be able to go to tune in and just learn all about branding from the members of Every Black. And so we do that about 2 to 3 times a year. And we always keep all the information is on our website, Every.Black, www.every.black. It also outlines to the different membership levels. I should mention that. We have a bronze, silver, gold, and platinum level. And we're looking to add even some more features to the platinum level, literally as we speak.
Well, great. Well, again, just make sure you contact Jimmy and see how you might become involved with everything that we're doing. Again, it's very, very exciting, especially moving forward. We're coming to the holidays and the beginning of the year, and everything looks very promising as we move forward. Well, that's all the time that we have. And again, Jimmy, I'd like to thank you for being with us today.
Sure.
And keep us updated with everything that's going on with Every.Black. And to our listening audience, I'd just like to say that, again, whatever you're going through, whether it's good or bad, remember, there's always more. More good things coming your way. We'll see you the next time.